The last time Ethan Carter heard his father's voice, it came through a crackling phone line from nearly 7,000 miles away. "I'm proud of you, son," his father had whispered, even if I don't say it enough. Those words had carried Ethan through 12 lonely years overseas. Life hadn't taken him away from home by choice. It had pushed him out. After college, constant arguments with his older brother, Daniel, and the cold resentment of his mother, Margaret, made staying impossible. Every family dinner became another reminder that Daniel could do no wrong, while Ethan was blamed for everything from choosing a different career to refusing to join the family business. Only his father, Robert, quietly believed in him, so Ethan left, determined to build a life where he wasn't measured by someone else's expectations. He worked impossible hours, slept in tiny apartments, skipped vacations, and saved every dollar he could. Every month, without fail, he wired money home. His father never asked for it, but Ethan knew Robert's health had been declining. Hospital bills, medications, and home care were expensive. His mother never thanked him. Instead, her messages were always brief. "Money received. Don't interfere. Daniel is handling everything." Still, Ethan kept sending help. He believed one day his family would remember that love wasn't measured by distance. On a rainy Thursday evening, as lightning flashed outside his apartment window, his phone rang. The screen displayed one word, "Mom." His heart skipped. She almost never called. "Ethan," she said without greeting. Her voice sounded strangely calm. "I've been trying to reach Dad." Ethan said quickly, "Is everything okay?" Silence. Then came the sentence that shattered 12 years of hope. "Don't come home to bury him." Ethan froze. His fingers tightened around the phone. "What? Your father died this morning." The room seemed to tilt. The rain outside disappeared beneath the pounding in his ears. "No," he whispered, "no. Why didn't anyone tell me he was sick? He didn't want to see you." The words landed harder than the news of death itself. "He died knowing exactly what kind of son you became." Ethan couldn't breathe. "Mom, that's not true. Please let me come home. There is no reason. I deserve to say goodbye. You lost that right years ago." Click. The line went dead. For several seconds, Ethan simply stared at the silent phone. Then he called back. No answer again. Voicemail again, blocked. His hands shook as he switched to another number. No answer. He called Daniel. Declined. He texted. Nothing. Through the night he kept dialing. Once, twice, 10 times. 20, 30. He didn't sleep. Every unanswered call felt like another shovel of dirt thrown onto his father's grave. By sunrise, he'd called 40. 7 times. 40. 7 desperate attempts to hear one familiar voice. 40. 7 reminders that his family had shut him out. Exhausted and heartbroken, Ethan booked the first available flight home anyway. If his father was truly gone, nothing would stop him from paying his respects. Just as he zipped his suitcase, his phone vibrated. Unknown number, he answered immediately. "Hello." A hesitant male voice spoke. "Mr. Carter, yes. My name is Richard Lawson. I represent your father's estate." Ethan straightened. The lawyer, "Yes." There was a long pause. Richard sounded nervous, almost frightened. I'm calling because there are matters that require your immediate attention." "My mother said my father didn't want me there." Another silence. Finally, Richard exhaled. "Mr. Carter." His voice dropped to a whisper. "That isn't what your father's records say." Ethan's pulse quickened. "What records? I can't discuss everything over the phone." "Then tell me one thing." Another pause. "When did my father write his will?" Richard swallowed audibly. 3 weeks before he passed away. Ethan frowned. "My mother told me he hadn't spoken for months." "I know, and, Richard said carefully, "the documents I have don't match the story your family has been telling." Ethan felt something shift inside him. Grief was still there, heavy enough to crush him. but beneath it another feeling emerged. Suspicion. His father had always been meticulous. Every receipt, every letter, every promise was carefully documented. If something didn't match, Robert would never have allowed it, unless he never had the chance. Richard spoke again, his voice trembling. "Mr. Carter, before you arrive, bring every financial record you have, every transfer, yes, every email, everything. Why?" The lawyer took a deep breath before answering. "Because after seeing your father's files, I'm beginning to believe someone worked very hard to erase you." Ethan slowly lowered the phone. Outside, the rain finally stopped. For the first time since hearing of his father's death, he realized this wasn't just about saying goodbye. Someone had buried the truth long before they buried his father, and Ethan was coming home to uncover it. Ethan barely remembered the 14-hour flight. The cabin lights dimmed and brightened. Meals came and went, and passengers slept peacefully around him. But his mind replayed the same sentence over and over. "Don't come home to bury him." Each repetition hurt more than the last. As the plane landed, Ethan looked out the window at the city he once called home. The familiar streets, neighborhoods, and skyline stirred memories of childhood bike rides, family picnics, and evenings spent fixing old radios with his father in the garage. Those memories now felt like they belonged to someone else. He rented a car and drove straight to the family home. The front gate was open. Cars filled the driveway, but there were no mourners left, only silence. A black wreath still hung on the front door. Ethan stepped onto the porch, his heart pounding. Before he could knock, the door swung open. His older brother, Daniel, stood there. For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. Daniel's expression hardened. "You actually came." "I came for Dad. The funeral was yesterday." Ethan stared at him. "Yesterday," Daniel folded his arms. "You were told not to come. You knew I lived overseas. You couldn't even wait one day. The arrangements were already made. You didn't even tell me he had died until after everything was over." Daniel shrugged. "Too late now." Ethan tried to step inside, but Daniel blocked the doorway. "Mom doesn't want you here." "I don't care what Mom wants." Before Daniel could answer, Margaret appeared in the hallway. She looked perfectly composed, dressed in black, without a single tear in her eyes. For a second, Ethan hoped she would embrace him. Instead, she looked at him like a stranger. "You should leave." His voice cracked. "I just want to see Dad's room. There is nothing for you to see. I want to say goodbye. You had 12 years. The words cut deeper than any knife. "I called 47 times. Ethan whispered. "You ignored everyone." Margaret's face remained cold. "We buried your father with the family who stayed." Ethan looked from his mother to his brother. Neither showed the slightest sign of regret. Without another word, the door closed in his face. Standing alone on the porch, Ethan realized he had never felt so unwanted. An hour later, he found himself standing before his father's grave. Fresh flowers covered the soil. The headstone was still damp from the morning rain. Robert Carter, beloved husband, devoted father. Ethan dropped to his knees. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry I wasn't here." His tears fell onto the fresh earth. Behind him, an elderly voice spoke gently. "Ethan." He turned. Mrs. Helen Brooks, the family's longtime neighbor, stood holding white lilies. She gasped before pulling him into a hug. "I thought they'd told you. They told me after the funeral." Her face filled with disbelief. "Oh, Ethan." She looked around carefully before lowering her voice. "Your father asked for you every single day." Ethan froze. "What?" He kept saying. "Call my son. I need to see Ethan." His chest tightened. "My mother said." "I know what she said." Mrs. Brooks shook her head sadly. "It wasn't true." She explained that during Robert's final weeks, Daniel controlled every visitor. Phone calls were screened. Mail disappeared. Even neighbors were told not to disturb the family. Your father waited by the window every afternoon, she said softly. He believed you'd walk through that gate. Ethan felt his knees weaken. He never stopped believing in you. A wave of anger rose through his grief. Someone had stolen his final chance to see his father. His phone buzzed. Richard Lawson, the lawyer. Ethan answered immediately. Mr. Carter, Richard said, can you meet me at my office in 1 hour? I'm at my father's grave. I know. His voice sounded even more anxious than before. I've reviewed additional files, and they raise serious concerns. What kind of concerns? The kind that could change everything. 1 hour later, Ethan entered the quiet law office. Richard greeted him with tired eyes, and a stack of thick folders spread across his desk. I hardly slept, the lawyer admitted. I kept comparing signatures, financial records, and medical documents. Ethan sat down. Richard slid a folder toward him. I need you to look at these. Inside were copies of bank transfers. Every monthly payment Ethan had sent for nearly 12 years. Receipts, hospital invoices, emails, medical insurance confirmations. Richard looked at him in disbelief. You kept all of this? My father taught me never to throw away proof. The lawyer slowly nodded. Good. He reached for another folder. This morning, I received a copy of the will your family wanted me to certify. And Richard placed it beside Ethan's records. The dates don't make sense. The signatures don't match. The witnesses changed their statements. He swallowed hard before looking Ethan directly in the eyes. Mr. Carter, for the first time in my 32-year legal career, I believe someone tried to rewrite your father's final wishes. The room fell silent. Ethan closed the folder carefully. His grief had not disappeared, but it now had a purpose. He hadn't returned home simply to mourn his father. He had returned to fight for the truth his father never got the chance to speak. The next morning, Ethan arrived at Richard Lawson's office carrying a worn leather briefcase that had traveled with him across 3 countries and 12 years of hard work. Inside were hundreds of pages of carefully organized records, bank transfers, emails, handwritten letters from his father, medical payment receipts, and even postcards Robert had mailed during happier times. Richard looked at the stack and let out a slow breath. I've never seen anyone keep records this complete. Ethan managed a faint smile. My father always said, memories fade, but the truth should never have to. For the next 3 hours, they compared Ethan's documents with the files submitted by Margaret and Daniel. The more they examined, the more disturbing the picture became. Several signatures on the will looked inconsistent. Dates on medical forms had been altered. Property documents contained corrections made with different ink. Even stranger, a large transfer from Robert's savings account had been authorized only 2 days before his death. At a time when hospital records showed he was heavily sedated and unable to sign anything, Richard leaned back in his chair. This isn't a simple mistake. No, Ethan replied quietly. It's planned, Richard nodded. I'm legally obligated to report this. By afternoon, the probate court ordered an immediate review of the estate. News spread quickly through the small town. Neighbors who had stayed silent for weeks suddenly began coming forward. The first was Mr. Henry Dawson, Robert's longtime fishing partner. I visited Robert in the hospital. The elderly man testified. He asked me if Ethan had booked his flight yet. Ethan lowered his eyes, struggling to hold back tears. Then came Nurse Olivia Grant. She had cared for Robert during his final 10 days. I heard him ask for his younger son almost every evening, she said. He even asked me to check whether anyone had called from overseas. Richard wrote every word down. The most painful testimony came from Robert's personal physician. Mr. Carter was mentally alert until 3 days before his passing. the doctor explained. He repeatedly expressed concern that Ethan hadn't been informed. Margaret's story, that Robert never wanted to see Ethan, was falling apart piece by piece. That afternoon, Margaret and Daniel arrived at the courthouse with their attorney. Daniel wore an expression of confidence, but it disappeared the moment Richard placed Ethan's records on the evidence table. "What is all this?" Daniel demanded. Richard answered calmly, 12 years of financial support. He held up another folder. Medical bills paid directly by Ethan. Another folder. Email correspondence between Robert Carter and his son. Then another. Letters written in Robert's own handwriting. Margaret's face turned pale. Those letters shouldn't exist. The courtroom fell silent. Richard slowly looked up. "I'm sorry. What did you just say?" Margaret realized her mistake, but it was too late. I meant, you said they shouldn't exist." Richard's voice became firmer. "Why would you believe that?" Neither she nor Daniel answered. The judge ordered a short recess. Outside the courtroom, Richard pulled Ethan aside. "I've practiced law for over 3 decades. I've seen greedy families. I've seen forged contracts. But I've never seen people work this hard to erase one child from his own father's life." Ethan looked through the courthouse window toward the cemetery on the distant hill. "I don't want revenge." Richard studied him carefully. "What do you want?" Ethan answered without hesitation. "The truth." When court resumed, a forensic handwriting expert presented the first official findings. The signature on Robert's final will showed significant differences from verified samples signed just weeks earlier. Another expert confirmed that 2 pages had been replaced after the document was originally prepared. Daniel shifted uneasily in his chair. Margaret refused to meet anyone's eyes. Finally, Richard stood before the judge. "Your Honor, based on the testimony, financial evidence, medical records, and forensic analysis, I respectfully request that the submitted will be suspended pending a full fraud investigation." The judge nodded. "So ordered." Margaret's attorney objected immediately, but the ruling stood. As everyone began leaving the courtroom, Richard quietly handed Ethan a sealed envelope. "I found this locked inside your father's original file." Ethan stared at the familiar handwriting on the front. "For my son, Ethan, open only if I cannot tell you myself." His hands trembled. He had spent 12 years wondering whether his father truly loved him. Now, the answer rested inside a single, unopened envelope. And for the first time since returning home, Ethan realized that while his family had buried his father, they had failed to bury the truth. Ethan sat alone on a wooden bench outside the courthouse. The sealed envelope resting in his trembling hands, he recognized his father's handwriting immediately. For a long moment he couldn't bring himself to open it. It was the last piece of his father that remained. Finally, with a deep breath, he broke the seal. Inside was a neatly folded letter. "My dear Ethan, if you're reading this, then I wasn't given the chance to tell you goodbye. I know someone may try to convince you that I stopped loving you. Don't believe them, not for a single second. You were never the son who abandoned me. You were the son I was proud enough to let chase his dreams. Every dollar you sent helped me more than you'll ever know. I kept every receipt because I wanted the world to know who stood beside me, even from thousands of miles away. If this letter reaches you, it means the truth needed someone brave enough to uncover it. Don't fight for money. Fight for my name. I love you, Dad." By the time Ethan finished reading, tears blurred every word on the page. For 12 years, he had carried the weight of guilt. In just a few paragraphs, his father had lifted it away. 2 weeks later, the fraud investigation reached its conclusion. Forensic experts confirmed that Robert Carter's final will had been altered after it was signed. Property transfer documents had been forged, bank withdrawals had been hidden, and hospital records had been manipulated to make it appear that Robert was incapable of changing his estate plans. The court declared the fraudulent documents invalid. Robert's original will, the one safely preserved in Richard Lawson's archive, was admitted as the only legal version. Its contents stunned everyone in the courtroom. Robert had divided his estate fairly between both sons, but he left Ethan something far more meaningful: the family home. Attached to the will was a handwritten note. "This house belongs to the son who never stopped coming home in his heart." Margaret lowered her head. Daniel said nothing. Neither of them looked at Ethan. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered, expecting an angry statement or a dramatic confrontation. Instead, Ethan quietly said only one sentence: "My father deserves to be remembered for his kindness, not for our mistakes." Then he walked away. A month later, Ethan unlocked the front door of the old family home. The walls held years of memories: birthday celebrations, Christmas mornings and evenings spent building birdhouses with his father. He could have sold the property for a fortune. Instead, he chose a different path. Using part of his inheritance and the savings he had built over years of hard work, Ethan restored the house and opened it as the Robert Carter Community Learning Center. The old garage where his father had taught him to repair broken radios became a free workshop where teenagers learned practical skills. The living room became a reading library. The backyard was transformed into a peaceful garden dedicated to families who had lost loved ones. He also established the Robert Carter Scholarship, helping students whose dreams were limited only by financial hardship. The town that had once believed Ethan had abandoned his father now saw the truth every single day. His mother's reputation quietly faded as neighbors learned what had really happened. Daniel eventually moved away, unable to escape the consequences of the lies that had destroyed his own family. Ethan never celebrated their downfall. He never insulted them. He never sought revenge through anger. Their own choices had become their punishment. One quiet evening, nearly a year after returning home, Ethan visited his father's grave carrying fresh white lilies. He placed them gently beside the headstone. "I kept my promise, Dad," he whispered. "I fought for your name." A gentle breeze rustled through the nearby oak trees. For the first time in years, Ethan felt peace instead of pain. He finally understood that the sweetest revenge wasn't proving his family wrong. It was proving that kindness could outlive betrayal. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Ethan smiled through tears. They had tried to erase him with lies. Instead, the truth had become the legacy that no one could ever bury.